Hi, and welcome to Fireside Chat with Kat. I'm Kat. I am an old punk. At 38 years old, that makes me pretty darn old in that scene. In my younger years, I used to run in a really rough crowd. I'm talking all the hard drugs, you name it, I've seen it. And I know many people who are no longer with us because of it. I can count them on all my fingers and toes, and probably yours as well. We used to slam around in mosh pits, in basement shows, in dingy underground clubs, trying to, feel better about our trauma, right? That's all that scene is. My right shoulder is covered in crappy tattoos from some of these tattoo artists, and you will never see me in a tank top. In fact, I give birth in a nightgown. I'm that modest. I won't even show my shoulders then. So today we're going to talk about where some of those tattoos come from and why Yahtzee punks need to F off. So we're going to throw rural white militiamen into this conversation as well, because it's kind of same crap, different pile. And I will talk to you about my experience with some of these folks. Now, I'm a modest lady, and I don't usually throw a ton of curse words around, but there will be a few more in this because of the nature of the folks we're talking about. And before any of you ask, the tattoos on my shoulder, no, it is not the German symbol. I never did that. They're just generally really bad tattoos. So before we get into all that, I will give you a farm update. So I posted a video the other day about our scavenger sink swap. So we're working on that, getting a new sink that we scavenged, putting that in, and that's exciting. Also in that video are some leverage strategies for MAGA. And if you're interested in that, go find the scavenger sink swap video. And you can also learn about indivisible.org, which is where you can get set up and communicate with people who can help with your skill sets, fight back to preserve our democracy. There's a local group starting here in the Keweenaw that I've been helping to get going. And I've been busy with that this week, trying to connect people. I really enjoy doing that, the connecting part of organizing. And I'm really excited. So if you're in the Keweenaw, I will drop the link down below of this video, but indivisible.org, anywhere in the country, and chapters are springing up, and you can also just connect to the national organization. This is how you can help, and we need your help right now. Whatever it is that you can do, we need you. So I've been busy with a lot of that this week, enjoying doing some community organizing. We've been homeschooling as usual in the winter. My boys are really interested in historical projects about our little ghost town here in the Copper Country and trying to figure out what it used to look like and who used to be here and all that stuff. And we're getting connected with some local historian type people who can help them learn about what our little ghost town was back in the 1880s or so. So other than that, we have a baby birthday today. It is our little baby. She is 1 year old, and I'm recording this on Valentine's Day. And 1 year ago, I had a 2.5 hour labor, and we had our sweet little girl show up. And I will talk more about home birth in a different video because I'm very well experienced in that as well. And that's a great topic that I love to talk about. So we're just doing a lot of chocolate cake today and loving on our little baby girl. She is just the pride and joy of everyone in the family. So that's always fun. And other than that, we are almost able to sled off the roofs of the buildings. If we shovel the snow correctly off of the roofs, you can sled off the roof. So maybe in a week or so, that will be a thing this winter, and the kids can actually go sledding off the roof. That's always fun when it works out that way. That's winter in the Copper Country, eh? So, we'll get into it now. So happy Black History Month. And when you're done here, I want you to go support Black creators, support Black businesses, talk with your friends of color, show lots of love at museums and cultural centers and all those wonderful things. Make sure as white people, because I'm assuming you're white, but I could be wrong, but especially white folks, let's really do our bit to show some love all throughout the year, but we're really going to talk about it right now. And so I thought that this was the best use of my skill set to talk about dismantling Caucasian dominance. And last week I posted a video about how white people need to do that, particularly middle-class white ladies. And I think that video was suppressed because I used a different term instead of the one I just used. And so if you're interested in that, you can go find it. It's about how white ladies brunch is over. And I also have another video about why, you know, European descendant people don't get their own history month this month. And that's my Czech American History Month. So you can look at all those. I'm doing a little series this month, just trying to do my bit to help white folks understand why it's not all about us all the time and why we need to do more to make this world, this country and world, a better place for all people that don't look like us, because we have that power to do that. So I am going to be using some different terminologies, and this is tough for me. I'm a very direct woman, but I recognize that things get suppressed on the internet, and this is all new to me, so I'm going to try not to stumble over my words, and I'm going to use kind of code words, and hopefully you'll pick up on what I'm saying. This is a challenge, like I said, I'm very direct, so bear with me here. All right, so we all saw that salute on Inauguration Day from Elon Musk, right? That was not a muscle spasm. We saw what it was. I knew that this was something that I needed to talk about because maybe a lot of people don't understand that these folks are real, but I know that they are because I've met them. So the title of this video, These Punks Need to F Off, is a Dead Kennedys song. And that was a punk band from the late 1970s, 80s. And that's the song. It's self-explanatory. Because these folks are all over the punk rock music scene. Now, some of them blatantly go by the German word. And then other ones kind of get this code word. And I'll just say this word once. And then I'll refer to it as the SH word, skinhead. Most of them go by that. And you can identify them, bald head, red suspenders, white shirt, all tight. They have tight black or tight jeans, straight-legged jeans. They roll them up at the bottom. They have shiny black boots that they ladder lace, and they have patches and things on their vests and their jackets that will usually identify them as part of a group because these folks always have a paraphernalia. So they exist. They're real. And I understand that there is some people will say there's a difference between the SHs and the German word. For this sake, we're going to just lump them all together. And if you folks really want to parse it out down below and school me on the history of the working class solidarity stuff, I'm familiar with a lot of that. Go ahead and explain it if you want, but I'm not really going to get into the nuts and bolts of all that. We're just going to call it same crap, different pile. All right? So, maybe things are different now in the punk scene, but 15, 20 years ago, these guys got a pass, and they showed up all the time. And we were all pretty rattled when we knew a crew of them was coming up from Chicago. So they're dirtbag, druggy drunks. They beat up women, and they were still allowed to come to shows. Nobody stopped them. Right? Pay your $5, you can get in at the door. Bring your own beer. Most of these guys were proud SHers, like I said, and they wouldn't have gone by that German word, but some of them do. Some of them do. One in particular that I knew, who was quite well known in the town of Muskegon, his name was Jake, H-I-T, blank, 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 right? That was what he went by. And he owned a tattoo shop, and that's where all the young scum punks hung out. He was about 10 to 15 years older than us. We were all in our early to mid-20s. And he was grooming these guys with drugs and nasty ideology about how he thought the world should be. I didn't hang out there a lot, but I was around, and I do know what went on in that shop. And the apartment above. And in the club behind. So, well aware. So the other one I know, he had the giant German symbol tattooed on his chest, and he only had it covered up with a picture of a cartoon bomb when the United States Army told him he had to so he could enlist. Because that's right, folks, these guys are all over the military, and he's not the only one that I knew who went into the military. They just have to cover that stuff up well enough to pass the recruitment. See, we have a problem. In fact, I dated one who called himself an SH, who slammed my head against a table corner so hard that I fell unconscious. And that was because I asked him not to drink whiskey in the house that night. He joined the Navy directly after that incident because I kicked him out of the house and he had nowhere else to go. And the Navy took him right up. He unalived himself a few years later, and may he rest in peace. So these guys are violent. They beat up women, children, and anyone they can get their hands on. I've seen it. I've been the victim of it. That's what they do. They are horrible drug and alcohol abusers. And they carry an unimaginable amount of trauma that they insist upon inflicting on anyone who comes within a 3-foot radius. They are also as dumb as a box of rocks. Yes, you heard me. If you're one, you're as dumb as a box of rocks. So you're now saying, well, Kat, you're a very intelligent and kind woman. Why on earth were you around these horrible monsters? Aren't you smarter than that? My answer to you is no. No, I wasn't. I grew up in an abusive home, and I did not know what not being abused looked like. To me, it was perfectly normal to see what these guys were doing and treating people the way they did. That was all I knew. And I had a thing for bad boys. Because, you know, I thought I was going to be like June Carter, and one of them was going to be Johnny Cash, and I was going to reform them. That's called a savior complex. And it's a common thing for people who grew up in childhood trauma. And women will particularly find themselves in these situations with men thinking that they're going to save him. And everything's going to be magically great, right? The fairy tale ending. It's called magical thinking. There's a whole bunch of psychological issues in there. So if you find yourself in those patterns with those kinds of men, I encourage you to get some help, because that's what I needed to get out of it, to understand why I was attracted to those people and what I was doing to keep ending up in that same situation. So everybody in the punk scene tolerated these guys, so why shouldn't I, right? It was normalized. I didn't know any different. Didn't have anybody saying, you probably shouldn't be around those guys, because nobody really cared about me. They were willing. I didn't have anybody. And again, I would never, ever want my children in this crowd. So now I'll tell you a little bit about the militiamen that I knew. And I didn't know as many of them personally, but I will also explain why white people don't run these guys out of town. Although I am hearing some cases of where people actually run some of these guys out of town when they are demonstrating in their violent ways, and they're getting run out of town, and I love that. Push back. Get these guys out of here. So the Caucasian dominists, or nationalist militias, Christian nationalism, whatever you want to call it, right? You all know the terminology. It's there. It exists all over this country. It was one of the first things we looked into when we moved to the Keweenaw Peninsula, because where we come from in Lower Michigan, there's a lot more of it, actually. There's not quite as much of it up here from what we can tell, at least organized-wise. So they're all over downstate, particularly in southeast Michigan or in northern Lower Michigan near Traverse City. And that's where I ran into some of them. So these guys have compounds, you know, barbed wire, razor wire all around. And sometimes you'd be out driving, two-tracking, and you'd come across it. And you sure would be threatened with all the signs that if you took a step further, you'd be shot in the face. So you made sure to turn right around when you saw that. And that's what I always did. I didn't want anything to do with these guys. I had a high school boyfriend whose father was one of the #1 suspects in the Oklahoma City bombing before Timothy McVeigh. So that's how close to home it was. These guys are just everywhere. When I hitchhiked and rode freight trains across the country for a year, which is a whole other story I can talk about, but when I was hitchhiking, particularly in southeast Michigan, I was picked up by some of them and given rides. And I was always told that I would be okay because I was being escorted by them through their territory. And I was all right because I was a young blonde babe, so I was exactly what they were looking for. And they never gave me any trouble. They let me go. Nobody bothered me. I had a big old pit bull with me, so I was fine. So why do we tolerate these violent men? Well, some of you know the answer to this. Some of you have unpacked the violence you've gone through, and you understand it. But for those of you who don't, I'll give you my opinion. And I do say men because I don't ever see women gravitating to this toxic space unless they are, one, trying to play a man's game, and I have seen that, and that's really weird when I see that, or two, they're trying to get protection from a man. So many of us do it because of just that. We want protection in an uncertain world, and we think that these guys theoretically can give us power and protection, even though I can all but guarantee you that he will beat the living daylights out of you. That's a fact. Some people are just too dumb to recognize what they're looking at, and that's a significant chunk of people. They really don't want to do the work to take a hard look at what they're looking at and say, eek, that looks bad. They're just kind of too dumb to do that work. They're too lazy, and they don't have the ability to. So I hope you don't find yourself in that situation and you're actually smart enough to be able to unpack what's right in front of you, because there's enough dummies out there. And also, many people, white people, we benefit from the Caucasian dominance. One way or another, we do. So a lot of people aren't going to push back on it because, and like I spoke about that in my last video, that's just too difficult for a lot of white folks to do. So many of us are born into abusive families, and we really don't understand what dangerous people looks like, especially when you're young. If you grew up in an abusive family, how are you going to learn to get out? How are you going to know? And that was myself. I did not know. I was able to ignore or make excuses for these violent white men because that's all I had ever known, and that's all I had ever seen, right? Is people making excuses for violent white men. That he didn't really mean it. I misunderstood it. It's not that bad, or I deserved what he did. Right? It's a bunch of gaslighting. That's the truth. Despite not liking the situation I found myself in, I didn't exactly know that there was a different way or how to get out of it. It took me years to climb out of it, and I got a really good therapist. I've had her for like 13 years now. It's great. So if you find yourself in that situation, please reach out and get help. It's a long road, but you can do it. You can get out, away from these guys. Otherwise, you're just replaying your trauma again and again and again, and it is never going to end. In fact, it gets passed down to the next generation. And that's what these men count on. The rest of us freezing up when they show up with their symbolic patches, their flags, or any other paraphernalia that they have. And you bet your buttons they have something that's giving them away. You just need to know how to look for it. In fact, I used to wear a patch on a jacket that had that German symbol being put into a trash can by a little stick figure. And it said, "Keep our country nice and clean." And I wore that until I got sick of old men being like, "Yeah, I really like that patch." Because they couldn't see well enough that I was actually opposed to that symbol. And they thought it was just the symbol in and of itself. That's how prevalent this was. So I took that patch right off because it was too much of a risk to be identified. So folks, these people giving that particular one-handed salute are definitely real. Make no mistake about it. They're slippery by design and will sneak their way into our civic lives if we let them. Once they're comfortable that no one will remove them, they will invite a friend. And then he'll invite a friend too. And before you know it, you have an organizing space for these wannabe 1930s Germans. And I know firsthand how violent these men are. And that's why we must stand together to oppose them. Do not let them get comfortable. Right now they are emboldened and giddy with power and potential. Oh, they're so excited. Been waiting forever for this. They won, and we have a mess on our hands to clean up. And it is up to us to clean it. Because my grandfather did not fight these bastards in World War II for me to just roll over and let them take this country. Neither did yours. We must each do everything in our power to banish these men back to the hell from which they came. So I ask you to join indivisible.org on that note. That is something you can do to help. And you don't have to be loud and brash like I am. And you don't have to have the same skill set that I do. Whatever your gifts are, your skills are, we need you. We really, truly do. This is your time to make sure that we preserve our democracy, to make your ancestors proud, the ones who fought against these SOBs in Europe. Make them proud. We need to do this for our children and grandchildren. It is our duty as Americans to preserve this. And if these guys have it their way, this will be their country 100%. And we cannot allow that to happen. So, next week, I will round out this series on how not to be a jerk of a white person, I guess is kind of what it is. And I'm going to talk about how to raise pro-diversity kids in a white rural part of the country. So I think we do a pretty good job of it here, and I'll share our tips and tricks for it for some of you folks who find yourself living in similar areas. So I hope that was helpful and informative. Please join indivisible.org as well as anything else in your community that you can. Support this cause right now because we really need it. So as always, I'm sending love from my radical heart to yours.